Grandmother's last words still echo in my mind. Protect our legacy, little fox. Some people will do anything for money, even family. I didn't understand what she meant until yesterday, when I opened her antique jewelry box and found it empty. My name is Fiona, and I'm about to tell you how I discovered my own mother betrayed not just me, but everything our family stands for. Mom, I called out, rushing down the stairs of our Victorian home, the hollow jewelry box clutched in my trembling hands. Where's Grandma Ivy's sapphire collection? My mother Jennifer looked up from her fashion magazine, her freshly Botoxed face barely moving as she spoke. Oh, honey, I've been meaning to talk to you about that. Meaning to talk about what exactly? The box felt heavy in my hands, despite its emptiness. These were supposed to be mine. Grandma made that clear in her will. There was an emergency, she said, setting down her magazine. I had no choice. What emergency? My voice cracked. Why didn't you tell me? Bills, sweetheart. Medical bills. She reached for her purse, hands shaking as she pulled out some papers. See? Everything just piled up so quickly. I snatched the papers from her manicured hands, scanning the dates and amounts. Something wasn't adding up. These are from 3 months ago. You told me everything was fine then. I didn't want to worry you, she whispered, tears welling up in her eyes. You were so busy with work, and after losing your grandmother... Stop. I held up my hand. Just stop. Those jewels were priceless family heirlooms. Grandma specifically left them to me because she always liked you better, Mom snapped, then immediately softened her tone. I'm sorry, baby. I was desperate. I'll make it up to you somehow. My Aunt Vera chose that moment to walk in through the front door. She never knocks anymore. Her eyes darted between us, sensing the tension. What's going on? Mom sold Grandma's sapphires, I said flatly. Apparently for some emergency she never told me about. Vera's face darkened. Jennifer, you didn't. What choice did I have? Mom stood up, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. The bills were overwhelming. I couldn't let them send collectors after us. Us? I laughed bitterly. There is no us in this situation. Those weren't yours to sell. I'm still your mother. She grabbed my arm. Everything I do for this family. I yanked my arm away, finally noticing something odd about her face. The smoothness, the slight swelling around her cheeks. Mom, what did you do to your face? She touched her cheek self-consciously. Just a little maintenance, nothing major. Vera stepped closer, examining our mother's face. Jennifer, is this what the emergency money went to? Mom's silence was all the confirmation I needed. You sold Grandma's heirlooms for plastic surgery? My voice came out barely above a whisper. Do you have any idea what those meant to her? To me? You don't understand, she sobbed, reaching for me again. I'm getting older. I need to maintain my appearance. The world is cruel to aging women. The world is cruel to liars, too. I shot back, backing away from her touch. Where did you sell them? Fiona, please. Where? Carlisle's Antiques downtown, she finally admitted, collapsing onto the sofa. But it's too late. They're gone. Some collector from Europe already bought them. I turned to Vera, who looked as disgusted as I felt. Did you know about this? She shook her head. No, but honestly, I'm not surprised. Your mother has always been creative with the truth when it comes to money. Vera, don't you dare. Mom stood up, mascara running down her cheeks. I've done everything for this family. Everything. And this is how you both treat me? I clutched the empty jewelry box tighter, remembering the day Grandma showed me each piece, telling me the stories behind them. How they'd been passed down through generations of strong women in our family. Women who faced real challenges, not imagined ones. I'm calling Dorian, I announced, pulling out my phone. He's still practicing estate law, right? You wouldn't. Mom gasped. Your own mother? Watch me. I started dialing. Grandma was right about you. She knew exactly what you'd try to do. That's why she made me executor of her estate. As my mother dissolved into theatrical sobs, I walked out of the room, Vera following close behind. My grandmother's words echoed in my head again. Protect our legacy, little fox. And that's exactly what I intended to do, no matter the cost. These bank statements don't lie, I muttered, spreading papers across my Aunt Vera's kitchen table. Look at these transactions from the past 6 months. Vera leaned over my shoulder, her reading glasses perched on her nose. Luxury spa treatments, designer boutiques, and is that a membership to some exclusive club? The Velvet Room, I confirmed, circling the recurring charge. $5,000 per month just for access. Some exclusive social club downtown. Your mother always did have expensive taste. Vera sighed, settling into the chair beside me. Remember when she spent your college fund on that trip to Paris? Yeah, and told me it was stolen by identity thieves. I grabbed my coffee, letting the bitter taste fuel my growing anger. I worked 3 jobs to pay for my first semester. My phone buzzed, another text from Mom. Baby, please call me. I can explain everything. I ignored it, just like the previous 20 messages. There's something else you should know, Vera said, getting up to retrieve a folder from her desk. I've been keeping track of some things since your grandmother passed. She pulled out a stack of receipts and handwritten notes. Every time Jennifer claimed there was an emergency, I documented it. Medical emergencies, car repairs, roof leaks. And let me guess, none of them were real? Bingo. Vera spread out the papers. That emergency appendectomy last year? She was actually at a wellness retreat in Arizona. The critical roof repair? New wardrobe from Nordstrom. My phone buzzed again. This time it was Dorian. Got the preliminary paperwork ready? Meet at my office at 2? Yes, please, I texted back. What's your plan? Vera asked, watching me gather the evidence. First, I'm meeting with Dorian to review Grandma's will. There might be clauses we can use to protect what's left of the estate. I stood up, stuffing papers into my messenger bag. Then I'm paying a visit to Carlisle's Antiques. I'll come with you, Vera offered, grabbing her car keys. That old buzzard Carlisle knows me. He might be more willing to talk. The drive downtown was tense. Another call from Mom. Ignored. Carlisle's Antiques was exactly as I remembered it from childhood visits with Grandma. The bell above the door chimed as we entered, and Mr. Carlisle himself looked up from his ledger. Vera McCarthy. He smiled, then his face fell slightly when he saw me. And young Fiona, I was expecting one of you eventually. The Sapphire Collection, I said without preamble. How much did she get for it? Carlisle shifted uncomfortably. I'm not at liberty to discuss— Cut the crap, George, Vera interrupted. We know Jennifer sold them. We need to know if there's any way to track down the buyer. He hesitated, then sighed. $150,000. Well below their actual worth, but she was insistent on a quick sale. My stomach lurched. $150,000? For emergency medical bills? Medical bills? Carlisle frowned. She mentioned something about a surgeon, but it wasn't for anything urgent. Said she'd been planning it for months. Just then, my phone lit up with a social media notification. My cousin Xavier had tagged me in a post. A photo from the Velvet Room taken last night. There was my mother, face freshly done, wearing a designer dress I'd never seen before, champagne glass in hand. The caption read, Auntie J living her best life. That lying— I couldn't even finish the sentence. My hands were shaking too hard. Fiona, Vera said quietly, there's something else you should know. Your mother came to me last week asking to borrow money. Said she needed it for property taxes. Let me guess. Another lie? I followed her after I turned her down. She went straight to a cosmetic surgeon's office. Vera pulled out her phone, showing me a photo she'd taken. I did some digging. She's scheduled for another procedure next week. The bell chimed again, and we turned to see Xavier walking in, looking sheepish. Hey, cuz. Guess you saw my post? Take it down, I growled. Already did, he said quickly. Look, I had no idea about the jewelry. Mom told me what happened this morning. I just thought you should see what she's really been up to. I looked at the evidence in my hands, bank statements, receipts, photos. 6 months of calculated deception, all leading up to the theft of my inheritance. Thanks for your help, Mr. Carlyle, I said, turning toward the door. I've got a meeting with my lawyer. Fiona, he called after me. For what it's worth, I tried to talk her out of it. Told her those pieces should stay in the family. They should have, I replied. And now she's going to learn exactly what that means. As we left the shop, I finally answered one of Mom's texts. Hope the new face was worth it. See you in court. Family dinner had always been a monthly tradition at our house, but this one was different. The tension was thick enough to cut with the expensive silver knives Mom insisted on using, the ones she probably bought with my inheritance money. Pass the potatoes, please, Mom said sweetly, as if nothing was wrong. Her new face looked even more obvious in the dining room lighting. Interesting choice of serving dishes, I commented, nodding at the crystal bowl. New? Oh, these old things. She laughed nervously. Just something I had in storage. Xavier nearly choked on his wine. Funny, I saw those exact ones at Marshall's last week. Premium collection, right? Mom's smile faltered slightly. I don't know what you're talking about. Just like you don't know about the emergency that required you to sell Grandma's sapphires? I set down my fork. Or should we discuss your actual emergency? The one involving Botox and fillers? The room went silent. Vera stopped mid-bite, and Xavier leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. This is hardly the time or place, Mom started. Actually, I interrupted, pulling out my phone, this is exactly the time and place. Everyone's here, so everyone can see exactly what kind of emergency you had. I pulled up the before and after photos from her surgeon's Instagram page. She hadn't even bothered to ask them not to post them. You went to Dr. Reynolds? Vera asked, peering at the phone. He's the most expensive cosmetic surgeon in the city. $150,000 worth of expensive, I added. That's what Grandma's sapphires went for. At a fraction of their real value, by the way. Mom's face, what could move of it, contorted with rage. You went behind my back? Investigated me like some kind of criminal? You went behind mine first, I shot back. Those jewels were legally mine. You committed theft, Mom. Plain and simple. I am your mother. Everything I own is yours eventually anyway. That's not how inheritance law works, Xavier chimed in. Actually, Fiona could press charges if she wanted to. Mom's head snapped toward him. Since when are you an expert on law? Since I started dating a legal assistant. He shrugged. She found some interesting things when I asked her to look into this, by the way. He pulled an envelope from his jacket and slid it across the table to me. You might want to read this later. Before I could reach for it, Mom snatched it up. Don't you dare, I warned, standing up. This is my house, she snapped, ripping open the envelope. As she read, all the color drained from her face. What is it? Vera asked. Nothing, Mom said quickly, trying to stuff the papers back inside. Xavier cleared his throat. Those are records of other sales. Apparently the sapphires weren't the only things that disappeared after Grandma died. Give me those papers, I demanded, walking around the table. Mom jumped up, backing away. These are private family matters. Exactly, I said. And I'm the executor of Grandma's estate. Those papers. Now. She looked around wildly, then made a dash for the kitchen. I heard the garbage disposal whir to life. Are you kidding me? I ran after her, but it was too late. The papers were gone. It doesn't matter, Xavier called from the dining room. I have copies. My girlfriend made sure of that. Mom slumped against the counter, finally dropping her perfect hostess act. You don't understand. None of you do. Do you know what it's like to watch yourself fade away? To become invisible? Do you know what it's like to watch your mother destroy everything your grandmother built? I countered. To realize every emergency, every crisis, every time you needed help was just another manipulation? I gave you everything. You took everything, I corrected her. And now you're going to face the consequences. The doorbell rang, making us all jump. Vera went to answer it. Fiona? She called. There's someone here you need to see. I walked to the front door, Mom trailing behind me. Standing on the porch was a man I hadn't seen in 5 years. My father. Hello, Princess, he said softly. Xavier called me. Said there were some things about your mother's financial dealings I should know about. Mom made a small choking sound behind me. Calvin, she whispered. You can't be here, actually, he said, pulling out what looked like old bank statements. I think I'm exactly where I need to be. We need to talk about what really happened to our joint accounts before the divorce. I felt a hand on my shoulder. Xavier. Remember those interesting things my girlfriend found? This is just the beginning. The papers Mom had destroyed suddenly didn't seem so important anymore. Whatever was coming next would be much, much bigger. Your mother didn't just take the sapphires, Dorian said, spreading documents across his office desk. She's been systematically liquidating assets for years. I slumped in the leather chair across from him, clutching my coffee like a lifeline. How bad is it? Bad enough that your father's here. He gestured to where Dad sat by the window, looking through old financial records. The beach house in Maine, Dad muttered. The vacation property in Colorado. All sold within months of each other, right before our divorce. But those were jointly owned, I said. How could she sell them without your signature? Dorian pulled out another document. That's where it gets interesting. Look at these signatures. I leaned forward, examining the papers. These don't match. Forgery, Dad confirmed, his voice tight. She got better at it over time, but these early ones are sloppy. My phone buzzed. Another text from Mom. Please come home. We can work this out as a family. Don't respond, Dorian advised, noting my expression. Everything needs to go through legal channels now. A knock at the door interrupted us. Xavier's girlfriend Maria walked in, carrying a thick folder. You're going to want to see this, she said, laying out more documents. I found something in the property records. There's a hidden asset, a condo downtown registered to a shell company. Let me guess, I said. Purchased around the time Grandma's sapphires disappeared? 2 days after the sale, Maria confirmed. But here's the kicker. It's not in your mom's name. It's registered to someone named Patricia Wells. Dad's head snapped up. That's her mother's maiden name. Classic hiding technique, Dorian noted. But sloppy. Very sloppy. There's more, Maria continued. The condo was used as collateral for a loan last month. A big one. I felt my stomach drop. How big? $200,000. Jesus, Dad whispered. What is she into? My phone rang. Vera this time. I put her on speaker. Fiona, you need to get to the house now. Her voice was urgent. Your mother's trying to access the safe deposit box at the bank. The one with Grandma's will and the rest of the jewelry. She can't, I said. I'm the only one with access. She's claiming emergency family authorization. Says you're incapacitated. She's what? I stood up so fast my chair toppled backward. I'm heading to the bank now, Vera said. But you need to get there first. You're the legal executor. Dorian was already grabbing his coat. I'm coming with you. Maria, keep digging into that loan. Dad? I'll stay here. Dad nodded. Keep looking through these records. The drive to the bank was a blur of red lights and honking horns. We made it just as Mom was arguing with the bank manager. There you are, she exclaimed when she saw me. Tell them, honey. Tell them about your condition. What condition would that be, Mom? I asked coldly. The one you made up to try and steal more family heirlooms? The bank manager looked between us. Mrs. Nelson, you claimed your daughter was in a medical facility, unable to make decisions. She's confused, Mom insisted. The stress has been too much for her. The only thing I'm stressed about, I said clearly, is discovering my mother's pattern of theft and fraud. Dorian stepped forward, presenting his credentials. I'm Miss Stone's attorney, sound mind, and the legal executor of the estate. Furthermore, he pulled out a document. We're here to freeze this account pending criminal investigation. Mom's perfectly sculpted. Fiona, you wouldn't? Actually, I would. To the bank manager. I'd like to access the box now. I want to review. To access. Of course. He nodded. Right this way. As we followed him to the vault, Mom grabbed my arm. You don't understand. That loan, I had no choice. There are people. Save it for your lawyer. I cut her off. You're going to need one. The safe deposit box contained exactly what I feared. Empty spaces where more jewelry should have been. But it also held something unexpected. A letter from Grandma, dated just weeks before she died. What is it? Dorian asked, noting my expression as I read. Proof, I said quietly. Proof that Grandma knew exactly what Mom was capable of, and instructions on how to stop her. Mom had gone pale. Ivy wouldn't what? Protect her legacy from you? I folded the letter carefully. Looks like she did exactly that, and now I know what I have to do next. As we left the bank, my phone buzzed one final time. A text from Xavier. Maria found something big. Really big. Come back to Dorian's office ASAP. The day wasn't over yet. Not by a long shot. Gambling debts. Maria announced as soon as we walked back into Dorian's office. Your mother's been losing big at the Velvet Room. That's what the loan was for. The social club? I sat down heavily. It's a casino? High-stakes private gambling, Xavier explained. Very exclusive, very illegal. That's why she needed the membership. Dad pushed a stack of papers toward me. Look at these credit card statements. Thousands withdrawn at ATMs near the club, multiple times per week. The loan sharks are getting impatient, Maria added. That's why she's been so desperate for quick cash. I thought about the empty safe deposit box, the missing jewelry, the sold properties. How much does she owe? At least $500,000, Maria said quietly. And that's just what we can trace. The room went silent. Dorian was the first to speak. We need to act fast. Fiona, that letter from your grandmother, what did it say? I pulled it out with shaking hands. Grandma set up a trust. A secret one, separate from the main estate. She knew Mom would try to get her hands on everything, so she created a safety net. Smart woman. Dorian smiled. Let me guess. You're the trustee? With full control, I confirmed. And there's more. She left evidence of Mom's previous frauds. Documents, photos, bank records, everything we need to prove this isn't new behavior. A knock at the door made us all jump. Vera walked in, looking grim. Your mother's at the Velvet Room, she said. I followed her there. She's trying to get another loan. We can't let that happen. Dad stood up. Those people are dangerous. We won't, I said, pulling out my phone. Dorian, how quickly can we freeze her accounts? With the evidence we have? Within the hour. Do it, I ordered. Xavier, call your contact at the Gaming Commission. If the Velvet Room is running illegal games, they need to know. On it. He grabbed his phone. What about me? Dad asked. Those forged signatures on the property sales. We need to file fraud charges. He nodded grimly. Already started the paperwork. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Your mother owes us money. Family should help family. You have 24 hours. They're threatening me now. I showed the message to Dorian. Perfect, he said. That's exactly what we need. Maria, start the restraining order paperwork. Already done. She held up a file. Just needs your signature. I signed quickly, then turned to Vera. There's one more thing we need to do. Remember that storage unit Grandma mentioned in her letter? Vera's eyes widened. The one with all the evidence? That's the one. We need to get there before Mom figures it out. I'll drive, Xavier offered. Maria, keep working with Dorian on the legal stuff. She nodded, already typing furiously on her laptop. The storage facility was on the outskirts of town. Unit 247 looked like any other, but when we rolled up the door, we found a gold mine of evidence. Look at these. Vera held up a stack of photos. Your mother with known loan sharks dating back 20 years. And these? Xavier pulled out more files. Bank statements showing systematic theft from your grandfather's business before he died. Grandma knew, I realized. She knew all along and was building a case. Your grandmother was nobody's fool, a voice said behind us. We spun around to find Dad standing there, holding an old leather journal. How did you— Ivy told me about this place years ago, he said. Made me promise to only reveal it if things got bad enough. I'd say we're there. He handed me the journal. This is your grandmother's record of everything your mother ever stole, lied about, or manipulated, including what she did to break up our marriage. I opened the journal with trembling hands. There, in Grandma's elegant handwriting, was the truth I'd been looking for my whole life. My phone buzzed again. Dorian. Accounts frozen. Gaming commission raiding the Velvet Room now. Your mother's being detained for questioning. It's time, I said, closing the journal. Let's end this. What are you going to do? Vera asked. Exactly what Grandma wanted, I replied. Use the trust to protect what's left of our family's legacy and make sure Mom never has the chance to destroy it again. She won't take this well, Xavier warned. No, I agreed, looking at the mountain of evidence surrounding us. But for once, she won't have a choice. As if on cue, my phone rang. Mom's number. But this time, I was ready to answer. Hello, Mother, I said calmly. I think it's time we had a real conversation about consequences. The silence on the other end told me she finally understood. Her game was over, and I was the one holding all the cards. The police station's interview room felt smaller than it looked on TV. Mom sat across from me, her perfect makeup smeared with tears, her designer outfit wrinkled from hours of questioning. Did you read Grandma's letter? I asked, sliding the envelope across the steel table. Her hands shook as she opened it. My dearest Fiona, she read aloud. If you're reading this, then Jennifer has done exactly what I feared she would. Keep reading, I said quietly. The money, the jewels, the properties, they were never what mattered. What matters is the truth. Your mother has spent her entire life running from it, destroying everything and everyone in her path. Mom's voice cracked. Mother, how could you? How could you? I countered. The loan sharks? The gambling? Stealing from your own family? I was going to win it all back, she whispered. Just one more game. One more chance. Detective Roberts knocked and entered, carrying a thick file. Mrs. Nelson, we've finished reviewing the evidence from the Velvet Room. Would you like to explain these? He spread out photographs. Mom with known criminals, handling large sums of cash. That's not— I didn't— Save it, I cut in. We found Grandma's storage unit. We know everything. Everything? Her face went pale. The forged checks from Grandpa's business. The real reason Dad left. The fake cancer scare you used to get sympathy money from the church? I leaned forward. 20 years of lies, Mom. All documented. She slumped in her chair. What do you want from me? The truth. For once in your life, just tell the truth. The door opened again. Dad walked in with Dorian. The Gaming Commission wants to make a deal, Dorian announced. They'll reduce charges if you testify against the Velvet Room's operators. And the loan sharks? Mom asked weakly. We've frozen all your accounts, I said. The trust Grandma set up? It's being used to pay back your legitimate debts. But the illegal ones? You're on your own. You can't do this to me. She stood up suddenly. I'm your mother. You stopped being my mother the moment you chose gambling over family. I shot back. The moment you sold Grandma's sapphires for plastic surgery. The moment you forged Dad's signature and drove him away. It wasn't like that, she protested. Dad stepped forward. Then what was it like, Jennifer? Tell us. Tell your daughter why you destroyed our family. Mom looked around the room like a cornered animal. Finally, she broke. "I couldn't stand being ordinary," she burst out. "Your grandmother had everything, the respect, the status, the legacy. I married into this family thinking I'd have that too, but all I got were expectations and judgment." "So you decided to steal it instead?" I asked. "I deserved it. All those years playing the perfect wife, the perfect mother, I deserved something for myself." Detective Roberts cleared his throat. "Mrs. Nelson, are you confessing to theft and fraud?" She fell silent, reality finally catching up. "Here's what's going to happen," I said, pulling out a document. "You're going to sign control of all remaining assets over to the trust. You're going to enter rehabilitation for your gambling addiction, and you're going to tell the Gaming Commission everything you know about the Velvet Room. And if I refuse? Then we press charges," Dad said. "All of them. The fraud, the theft, the forgery. You'll go to prison, Jennifer." She stared at the document for a long moment. "What about my debts?" "The legal ones will be handled," I assured her. "The illegal ones, well, maybe prison would be safer than facing those collectors." Her hand trembled as she reached for the pen. "I never meant for it to go this far." "You never meant to get caught," I corrected her. "There's a difference." She signed the papers, then looked up at me with tears in her eyes. "What happens now? Now?" I stood up. "Now you face the consequences, just like Grandma knew you'd have to someday." As we left the police station, Dad put his arm around my shoulders. "Your grandmother would be proud of you, Princess." "I'm not sure about that," I said. "This doesn't feel like a victory." "It's not supposed to," Dorian chimed in, "but it's necessary. Sometimes protecting a legacy means making hard choices." My phone buzzed. A text from Xavier. "Maria found the buyer of the sapphires. He's willing to sell them back." I smiled slightly. Maybe some things could be recovered after all. But as I watched Mom being led away by officers, I knew some things would never be the same. And maybe that was exactly what needed to happen. "Please, Fiona, I need money for the commissary," Mom begged through the prison phone. Her face on the video screen looked different. Older, stripped of its artificial smoothness. 3 months in county jail had worn away the facade she'd spent so much money creating. "No," I said firmly. "The trust will provide basic necessities, but that's it. No extras. You don't understand what it's like in here." Her voice cracked. "The other inmates, maybe you should have thought about that before you testified against half the people in the Velvet Room." She flinched. "They were criminals." "So were you, Mom. That's why you're there." A guard appeared behind her. "5 minutes, Nelson." Mom leaned closer to the screen. "What about the rehabilitation program? If I complete it, can I come home?" "Home?" I laughed without humor. "The house has been sold to pay your debts, remember? But where will I go when I get out? The trust will provide for a small apartment and living expenses, contingent on you maintaining sobriety and attending therapy." I held up the document. "Just like we agreed." "You're treating me like a child." "No, I'm treating you like someone who stole from their family and gambled away their future." I softened my tone slightly. "This is what getting help looks like, Mom." The door to the prison visiting room opened and Vera walked in. Mom's expression hardened. "What is she doing there?" "Supporting me," I said. "Unlike some people." Vera placed a hand on my shoulder. "Jennifer, the sapphires are back in the family's possession." Mom's eyes widened. "How?" "The buyer was more understanding than you deserved," I explained. "Once he learned they were stolen family heirlooms, he agreed to sell them back. At cost." "Using my money, I suppose?" "Using what's left of Grandma's trust," I corrected her. "The money you didn't manage to gamble away." A tear rolled down her cheek. "I never meant to hurt you, baby. I needed to feel special." "You were special, Mom. You were my mother. That should have been enough." The guard appeared again. "Time's up." "Wait!" Mom pressed her hand against the screen. "What about your father? Are you talking to him?" "Dad's been helping clean up your mess," I said. He's been more of a parent in the past 3 months than you were in the last 5 years. He left us. No, you drove him away. With lies, with theft, with your endless need for more. I stood up. The truth was in Grandma's journal, remember? She slumped in her chair. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I know you are. But sorry doesn't fix what you broke. Then what will? She whispered. Time. Truth. Actually doing the work instead of just pretending to change. I gathered my things. Complete the program, Mom. Go to therapy. Deal with whatever made you think destroying our family was worth it. And then we'll see. I nodded to the guard. We're done here. As we walked out of the prison, Vera squeezed my arm. You're doing the right thing, you know. Am I? Sometimes it feels like I'm being too harsh. She needs boundaries, Fiona. Structure, real consequences. My phone buzzed. A text from Dad. Dinner tonight? Xavier and Maria are coming. They found something else in the records you should see. More secrets? I asked Vera. I'm not sure I can handle any more. Actually, she smiled. This one might be good news. Your grandmother left something else in that storage unit. Something your mother never knew about. What? Come to dinner and find out. She dangled her car keys. Sometimes family secrets can heal as well as hurt. I took one last look at the prison behind us. Mom was being led back to her cell, shoulders slumped, designer clothes replaced by an orange jumpsuit. You know she'll try to manipulate you again, Vera warned. I know. I got into the car. But this time I'm ready for it. Because of Grandma's letter? Because I finally understand what Grandma meant about protecting our legacy. I buckled my seatbelt. It's not about the jewelry or the money, it's about breaking the cycle. As we drove away, another text came through, from Mom's rehabilitation counselor. Your mother asked to start individual therapy today. Small steps, but progress. Maybe, just maybe, some things could be rebuilt. Not the same as before, but something new. Something honest. For now, though, I had a dinner to get to. And a family, or what was left of it, waiting to share one more secret. This time, I hoped, one that wouldn't break my heart. Happy birthday, Grandma, I whispered, placing fresh flowers beside her headstone. The morning dew still clung to the grass, and the sapphire pendant around my neck caught the early sunlight. She would have loved this, Dad said, standing beside me. All of us here together. Xavier and Maria spread out a blanket nearby, while Vera unpacked a basket of Grandma's favorite breakfast pastries. Our new tradition, morning picnics at the cemetery, had started spontaneously after we discovered Grandma's final gift. Show them the letter, Xavier urged. The real one. I pulled out the weathered envelope we'd found hidden in a false bottom of the storage unit. Unlike Mom's manipulation and lies, this secret had been worth keeping. Dear ones, I read aloud. If you're having breakfast by my grave, it means the truth has finally come out. Jennifer's actions have consequences, yes, but don't let them poison your hearts. Family isn't just blood. It's choice. Choose to be better. Choose to be together. She knew. Vera smiled. She knew we'd find our way back to each other. There's more, I continued. In my safety deposit box, the real one, not the decoy Jennifer knew about, you'll find letters for each of you. Read them when you're ready. And remember, sometimes family trees need pruning to grow stronger. Dad pulled out his own letter. Mine told me to come home, to help you through this. She knew I'd been staying away out of shame. Mine led me to Maria. Xavier squeezed his now fiancé's hand. Grandma's letter told me to look closer at the people already in my life. And mine? Vera held up her paper. Told me to be the bridge this family needed, to help pick up the pieces. My phone buzzed. Mom's Rehabilitation Center. I answered on speaker. Fiona? Mom's voice sounded different. Clearer, more genuine. I finished the program today. 6 months sober. That's good, Mom. I'm not asking to come home. she said quickly. I know I haven't earned that. I found something in therapy about why I did what I did. Would you let me tell you about it? Over coffee, maybe? I looked at my family gathered around Grandma's grave, then at the final line of her letter. Forgiveness isn't forgetting. It's choosing to give someone the chance to change. Coffee, I agreed, but not alone. Dad and Vera will come too. Thank you. Mom's voice cracked. And Fiona? I saw the trust statement. Thank you for paying for my therapy instead of just the basics. After hanging up, Maria pulled out one last item from the picnic basket, Grandma's old photo album. Look what we found in the storage unit. She opened to a marked page. Your grandmother left notes. There, beside each family photo, were Grandma's observations. Not just dates and places, but insights. Warnings about Mom's early signs of trouble. Hope for Dad's eventual return. Pride in my resilience. She didn't just leave us money or jewelry, I realized. She left us a roadmap. For healing, Dad nodded. For rebuilding, Vera added. For choosing better, Xavier finished. I touched the sapphire pendant, not just recovered jewelry now, but a symbol of everything we'd learned. So, what do we choose? We choose to be here, Dad said firmly. To be honest, Vera added. To be family, Xavier and Maria said together. The morning sun had fully risen now, warming the cemetery and making the dew sparkle like scattered diamonds. Somewhere in the distance, church bells rang. Your turn. Dad nudged me. What do you choose? I looked at my phone, at Mom's text asking about coffee, at the family surrounding me with love and truth instead of manipulation and lies, at Grandma's headstone, where she'd watched over all of this unfolding exactly as she'd planned. I choose to be strong, I said. Strong enough to set boundaries. Strong enough to forgive without forgetting. Strong enough to let people earn their way back without guaranteeing they'll succeed. Just like Ivy. Vera smiled. Just like Grandma, I agreed, touching the headstone one last time. And that's the best legacy of all. We settled in for breakfast, sharing stories and memories, laughter mixing with the morning bird song. Not a perfect family. We'd never be that. But a real one, finally. One built on truth instead of lies, strength instead of manipulation, love instead of fear. And somewhere, I knew, Grandma was watching with satisfaction, knowing her final secret had done exactly what she'd intended. It had given us the chance to choose what kind of family we wanted to be. We chose well.
Hello, my name is Susan, a 35-year-old woman whose belief in fairy tale endings was firmly in place until 4 years ago when my life veered in an unexpected direction. That was when I met Justin, who would later become my husband. Our story, which began as a romantic narrative filled with love and trust, gradually unfolded into a tale of betrayal within the confines of what appeared to be an idyllic marriage. Our first encounter occurred on a typical Tuesday morning at the corner cafe. I was engrossed in a Scott Turow legal thriller, completely absorbed in the twists of the plot, when Justin walked in. His presence was immediately striking, confident yet approachable, with a warm smile that seemed genuinely welcoming. "Is that Gish's latest?" he inquired, nodding at my book with a friendly tone laced with real interest. "Yes, I just started it. He never disappoints," I replied, pleasantly surprised by how naturally our conversation flowed. Over the following weeks, Justin and I discovered our mutual passions for music, especially classic jazz, and our love for exploring quaint bookstores scattered throughout the city. Justin was charming, respectful, and always attentive, making every meeting feel like a reunion with a long-lost friend. One evening, as we strolled by the river, Justin's expression grew earnest. "Susan, I've never felt like this before. I think I'm falling for you," he confessed under the soft glow of the street lamps. His words ignited a warm rush of emotions within me. and I confessed, "I feel the same, Justin. You're unlike anyone I've ever met." 7 months swiftly passed, and our bond only deepened. During a cozy dinner at my apartment, Justin proposed, and I accepted without a second thought. I loved him deeply and was optimistic about our future together. However, the joy of our engagement was soon shadowed by anxiety as the time approached to meet Justin's parents. His mother, Catherine, was a stern woman with piercing eyes that scrutinized my every action, while his father was more approachable but carried a serious demeanor, particularly about marriage. The conversation shifted to a prenuptial agreement at a formal dinner at their home. "It's just practical," his father declared, catching me off guard. Given my previous experience with an unfaithful ex, I realized the importance of setting clear boundaries in relationships. With a firm tone, I proposed a condition. If either of us strays, the one who cheats will owe the other $200,000. Justin looked at me, his face a mixture of shock and admiration. "Susan, I promise I'll never cheat on you," he assured me with sincerity. Our wedding was a splendid event, brimming with joy, dance, and heartfelt promises of eternity. The initial year of our marriage was like living a dream. We journeyed to enchanting places, spent serene evenings together at home, and supported each other's dreams and ambitions. Justin was more than just my spouse. He was my best friend and confidant. After the excitement of our wedding, settling into married life was surprisingly smooth. Our first year felt like a blissful bubble, untouched by the outside world. Our honeymoon in Italy was magical, wandering along the Santa Caterina del Sasso as two lovers lost in the romance. "Can you believe we're here?" I asked Justin one evening as we watched the Eiffel Tower light up. He pulled me close and replied, "I believe anything is possible with you. This is just the beginning for us, Susan." Those days were filled with laughter, romantic dinners, and dreams of a future together. Returning home with a suitcase full of cherished memories, our connection seemed stronger than ever. Our daily routine was simple yet fulfilling. Justin would leave for work each morning, and I'd prepare dinner for his return. Our evenings were spent in deep conversation, discussing everything and anything. One evening, while tidying up after dinner, Justin said, "I never thought I'd be this happy doing ordinary things like washing dishes." I playfully splashed water at him, and he laughed, catching it in his hand. "That's because you've got an amazing wife. It's all about good company," I joked. This simple, joyful routine underscored the deep bond and shared happiness that characterized our life together. He once told me, "Marrying you was the best decision of my life, despite the increasing pressure from others, especially the expectations about starting a family soon." Our joy remained steadfast. Catherine, Justin's mother, would often drop not-so-subtle hints during family gatherings asking, "So, when are we going to hear some good news?" I typically responded with a lighthearted joke, but her persistent questioning began to wear on me over time. Justin would comfort me, reassuringly saying, "Don't let my mom get to you. We'll start a family when we're ready and not a minute sooner." Our first anniversary was marked by a magical celebration with a quiet dinner at home. Justin surprised me with a necklace I had admired months before, saying, "Happy anniversary, Susan. Here's to many more years of happiness," his eyes aglow with love. As we cuddled on the couch that night, I felt incredibly blessed. However, as we entered our second year of marriage, the pressure from Justin's family, especially Catherine, began to take its toll. It wasn't just about starting a family anymore. Her critiques permeated every part of our lives. Catherine's disapproval, often veiled in seemingly helpful comments, turned every family visit into an ordeal. One afternoon, as I was setting the table for lunch, Catherine walked into the kitchen, eyeing the spread with a disapproving frown. "Is this what you're serving? A bit simple, don't you think?" she remarked, her tone dripping with disdain. Clenching my jaw, I strived to keep my composure as her criticisms didn't stop at my cooking. She found fault in everything from our home decor to how I spent my free time. One evening, while we were relaxing in the living room, Catherine gave her unsolicited opinion. "You know, Susan, if Justin gave me the money he spends on you, I'd consider hiring a proper cleaner and cook." Justin appeared uncomfortable but remained silent, which felt like a betrayal. Despite seething with frustration, I managed to say, "Well, Catherine, I'm doing my best here." The hurt deepened as I noticed Justin's attitude beginning to echo his mother's criticisms, albeit more subtly. After one of Catherine's visits, he casually suggested, "Mom might have a point about the house. Maybe we should consider getting some help." A wave of hurt and frustration washed over me. I couldn't help but question Justin. "So, you think I can't handle things either?" He quickly backpedaled, saying, "No, that's not what I meant," but the harm was already done. Constant criticisms and Justin's growing detachment put a strain on our marriage, leading to petty arguments and turning our once effortless conversations into tense discussions. After one particularly intense argument, I found myself pondering aloud, "What happened to us, Justin? We used to be a team." He ran a hand through his hair, visibly frustrated, and responded, "I don't know, Susan. Everything feels so complicated now." That night, I went to bed feeling isolated and misunderstood. Catherine's subtle yet harmful remarks had not only invaded our home, but were also eroding our relationship, making me doubt whether the love Justin and I once shared could survive this constant barrage of negativity. As our 4th year of marriage began, unease settled in my heart. The once vibrant flame of our love now flickered under the shadow of doubt and distrust. It started with repeated calls from a name that frequently appeared on Justin's phone, Brian. Justin's demeanor shifted every time that name flashed on his screen. One evening, as we were watching TV and his phone rang yet again, I noticed the nervous glance he threw my way. Trying to sound nonchalant, I asked, "Who's Brian?" "Just a new guy at work, no one important," Justin replied, his voice a bit too casual, his explanation sounding rehearsed. However, Justin's behavior continued to change. He began coming home late, often providing flimsy and inconsistent reasons for his tardiness. Even his wardrobe changed, shifting from casual to sharply tailored suits. One night, as he was getting ready to leave for another late work night, I couldn't help but notice his dressed-up appearance. "Working late again?" I asked, noting the change. "Yeah, big project," he answered, but the way he said it made me feel even more disconnected from the man I once knew so well. He spoke without looking at me. "Don't wait up," he said tersely. The frustration I'd been bottling up erupted, and I finally confronted him. "Justin, this isn't like you. What's happening?" My voice shook, betraying my mix of anger and fear. Justin sighed heavily, his expression a mix of guilt and irritation. "I've told you, it's just work. Why can't you trust me?" he retorted. "Because something's off. You're hardly ever home, and even when you are, you seem distant, like you're a million miles away," I countered. Justin gave no reply, merely grabbed his coat and left, leaving me more isolated than ever in the silence of our home. That night, as I lay in our empty bed, I reached a painful decision. I couldn't continue living in a cloud of doubt and suspicion. I needed to uncover the truth, no matter the cost. The next morning, I took a step that felt like betrayal, yet necessary. I called a private detective. The constant stress and uncertainty had become unbearable, and I was determined to find answers. The ensuing days were a blur of nervous anticipation. I felt as though I was balancing on a thin wire, trying to keep my life seemingly normal while everything around me seemed to be on the verge of collapse. Then the detective's call came, and with it, my world shattered. "Mrs. Johnson, we found conclusive evidence. Unfortunately, your suspicions were correct," the detective said solemnly. He revealed that Justin had been unfaithful, and the person he had been speaking to as Brian was, in fact, a woman. The details of their secret meetings, complete with timestamps and photographs, were undeniable. Sitting there with the phone in hand, I was overwhelmed by a torrent of emotions, devastation at the betrayal, yet a grim sense of vindication. My deepest fears had been confirmed, not just as baseless worries, but as stark, undeniable truths. Now, armed with this knowledge, I faced the daunting task of deciding what came next. I chose not to confront Justin right away. I needed to grasp the full scope of his betrayal, not just the evidence of his infidelity. One evening, as I passed by his home office, I inadvertently overheard a conversation that sent a chill down my spine. Justin was speaking with his mother, Catherine. "Mom, I'm planning to end it with Susan after your birthday," Justin stated, his voice chillingly devoid of any warmth he once had for me. "Oh, that's wise, dear. Make sure she gets me a nice 60th birthday present before you drop the bomb," Catherine responded, her tone dripping with cold calculation. Leaning against the wall, I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. Not only was my husband unfaithful, but he and his mother were also conspiring against me, planning to use me for one last lavish gift before casting me aside. Fueled by a potent mix of anger and determination, I decided to play along. I carried on as if nothing was wrong, all the while secretly gathering more evidence of Justin's infidelity. The detective supplied me with everything: photos, videos, and even audio recordings. I was building my case, preparing for the moment I would confront them. Each night, as I lay beside the man who had betrayed me, a plan began to take shape in my mind. I would wait until after Catherine's birthday. I would give them the illusion of victory, letting them think they had outsmarted me. But when they least expected it, I would reveal everything and turn the tables. As Catherine's 62nd birthday drew near, I maintained a facade of ignorance, acting as if everything was normal. Inside, I was a cauldron of emotions, seething with anger and a sense of betrayal, yet strategically masking my feelings to prepare for the impending confrontation. With a fierce determination to see my plan through, the days leading up to Catherine's birthday crept by. At a family dinner a few days before the celebration, Catherine casually brought up her upcoming 62nd birthday. With a sly smile, she hinted, "So, Susan, I'm expecting a grand 62 the birthday. You must have planned something special for me." Keeping my emotions under control, I replied with restrained enthusiasm, "Of course, Catherine. I've arranged a dinner at the city's most luxurious restaurant. It will certainly be a night to remember." Her eyes sparkled with glee, oblivious to the trap I was setting. "How wonderful! It's just a small family gathering, right?" she inquired. "Yes, very intimate and exclusive, just for close family," I confirmed, my words tinged with veiled irony. Later that night, Justin approached me, a hint of suspicion in his voice. "That's quite a generous plan for Mom's birthday. Are you sure about this?" I faced him, maintaining my composure. "It's a significant birthday, and I want to do something special for her." Justin seemed satisfied, yet I could sense he was puzzled by my eagerness to indulge his mother. As the day of the dinner drew near, I handled the final arrangements with meticulous care, confirming the booking under Catherine's name, double-checking the guest list, and ensuring everything was perfectly in place for the grand evening. Playing the role of the dutiful wife and daughter-in-law, I masked my true intentions under a facade, ready to expose the betrayal and deceit that had eroded our marriage. The night before the dinner, as I lay in bed, a twisted sense of satisfaction enveloped me. I was just hours away from turning the tables on Justin and Catherine, ready to reveal everything in a dramatic climax that would shake the foundations of our relationship. They thought they were exploiting me for one final advantage before casting me aside, unaware that I was the one in control of the game. The evening of Catherine's 62nd birthday unfolded at a luxurious restaurant with every detail carefully orchestrated to reflect the opulence of the occasion. While Catherine basked in the lavishness, I maintained the role of a gracious daughter-in-law, my practiced smile concealing the storm within. As the dinner drew to a close, the waiter presented the bill, a staggering $6,800. With a composed demeanor, I reached for my card, my heart racing. After swiping the card, I glanced around the table, catching Catherine's self-satisfied smirk and Justin's uneasy glance. "Thank you for such a wonderful evening, Susan. This is truly generous," Catherine remarked, her voice laced with feigned gratitude. Seizing the moment, Justin leaned in with a tone of finality. "By the way, Susan, I want a divorce." His words hit me like a physical blow, but I refused to show any sign of hurt. Catherine added sharply, "Well then, I guess you should leave. This is a family gathering after all." Without a word, I stood, maintaining my dignity amidst the internal chaos, and walked out of the restaurant. As soon as I was out of sight, I swiftly canceled the payment on my phone and blocked the shared bank account, ensuring that Justin couldn't cover the cost either. Back at home, I quickly packed my belongings, the weight of my final actions settling in. I was leaving this chapter of my life behind, stepping into an uncertain but hopeful future. Soon my phone erupted with calls. I answered, and Catherine's voice, shrill with rage and panic, filled my ears. "The payment didn't go through, and the restaurant staff called the police. What have you done?" she shrieked. Her words were cries of anger and disbelief, but I felt a sense of release and vindication. I had escaped their manipulations and was now free to rebuild my life on my terms. I remained silent, letting her tirade wash over me. This was their own doing. Their betrayal and manipulation had come full circle, now haunting them. After ending the call, I looked around the empty house that once brimmed with dreams and love, now just a hollow shell. Taking a deep breath, I stepped out the door and didn't look back. Their calls continued, desperate pleas for help, but I no longer felt obliged to answer. I had firmly closed that chapter of my life. In the end, they paid the price. Justin had to borrow money from his parents to cover the bill, but where the money came from didn't concern me. It was a small compensation for their betrayal, but more importantly, it represented closure. Sitting in the lawyer's office, signing the last of the divorce papers, I felt a wave of peace wash over me. The journey had been fraught with betrayal and heartache, but I had emerged stronger and more resilient. Walking out into the sunlight, I felt like a truly free woman, ready to embrace a fresh start. The future was uncertain, but it was mine to shape. After all the darkness, I finally felt like I was stepping into the light, ready to craft a new chapter on my terms. Hello, I'm Karen, an architect by profession. Today, I'm embracing a new role, that of a bride filled with anticipation as I make my way down the aisle. Every aspect of our wedding, from the vibrant blooms to the carefully curated playlist, reflects my detailed planning. I've always envisioned this day as a page lifted from a romance novel, a joyful celebration of our love. At the altar, I see Terry, my soon-to-be husband, an engineer whose pragmatic, down-to-earth approach complements my artistic spirit. Together, we felt like the ideal pair, each enhancing the other's strengths. As I draw closer, I notice a hint of concern in Terry's eyes, though I attribute it to typical pre-wedding nerves. Nearby, I overhear Terry's mother, Melissa, whispering with an intense, unsettling look. Despite her smiles and compliments, her eyes seem to tell a different story. The ceremony moves forward, but Terry's vows feel somewhat cold, and there's a noticeable hesitation before his "I do." During the ring exchange, Melissa makes a point of taking photos, her tone more cautious than celebratory. At the reception, Melissa delivers subtly critical compliments about my dress. She praises its beauty while gently critiquing its unconventional style, lightly noting that we're celebrating love in our unique way. I brush off Melissa's veiled criticisms about our wedding choices, but before things can escalate, Terry steps in, asking his mother for a private moment with me. His intervention feels more like a resignation than genuine support, adding a strange note to what should be a day of happiness. Looking around the room for reassurance, I hope to find comfort amid the wedding chaos. Yet, I can't shake the feeling that something fundamental isn't right. The tension is palpable, and the warning signs are too prominent to ignore any longer. As Terry and I step onto the dance floor for our first dance, the physical space between us mirrors the emotional gulf. Although we move in sync, emotionally we are worlds apart. The song, meant to symbolize our union, now seems ironically cruel. As the last notes of the music died away, Terry's attempt at comfort only highlighted the deepening gap between us. "So, Mrs. Karen, ready for forever?" he asked. The irony of his question thick in the air. I wanted to share my uncertainties, to question if our future together would always be shadowed by today's discomfort. Instead, I hid my doubts behind a tentative smile, clinging to the hope that the dark clouds hanging over us would eventually clear, and that this rocky beginning wasn't a preview of our future. Little did I know this day was just the prelude to a challenging period that would test not only the resilience of our marriage, but also the core of my identity. As we raised our glasses in a toast to our union, the celebratory words rang hollow, eclipsed by an unsettling sense of loss. The journey back to my home, a charming 3-bedroom house that symbolized my hard-won independence, marked the start of our shared life. This space was meant to be our sanctuary, the solid foundation for our future together. However, it quickly turned into the battleground for a series of conflicts that felt more like intrusions than the beginnings of marital harmony. Melissa, residing just a short distance away, began to drop by with alarming regularity, often uninvited. Her criticisms were relentless, targeting everything from my cooking to the decor of our home. Whether she was complaining about the taste of my dishes or the choice of bathroom tiles, her critiques were varied yet consistently harsh. Terry's efforts to mediate were weak at best, seeming more performative than genuinely protective. Melissa's intrusions became a regular ordeal. Each visit was another chance for her to assert dominance through thinly veiled insults and critiques. The turning point came one afternoon when Melissa arrived with suitcases in tow, her intentions clear and her sense of entitlement palpable. This was no ordinary visit. It was an invasion, threatening to suffocate the nascent life of our young marriage. "I'll be staying here now," she declared, breezing past me to place her luggage in my favorite cozy corner by the window, a haven for my quiet reflection and reading. "This spot will suit me just fine," Melissa announced, her tone leaving no room for argument. As I watched Melissa settle into our home, my heart sank. I caught Terry's eye, silently pleading for him to step in and protect the sanctity of the place we called ours. In a moment that called for unity, I pulled him aside, my voice shaking with emotion. "This is our home, Terry. Shouldn't we have talked about this together?" His look was distant, missing the warmth that had once comforted me. "Mom's getting older, Karen. It's not fair for her to be alone. She needs to be with family," he explained, emphasizing family in a way that made me feel more like an outsider than a partner. "So, I'm not family? Is that it?" The words stumbled out, heavy with hurt, as tears began to form. Terry replied quickly, his patience thinning. "You know that's not what I mean, Karen, but I owe it to her. What about what we owe to each other? Aren't we supposed to be building our life together, not adjusting it to include your mom as a permanent third?" I argued, feeling as though my words were just bouncing off him. My concerns, my feelings, seemed to vanish into thin air, and just like that, the decision was made. Melissa's presence in our home was a done deal, my objections overridden. With Melissa in the house, the atmosphere changed drastically. Every space that once held our shared dreams now carried the burden of tension and disagreement. My tranquil reading nook was overrun with her belongings. The kitchen transformed into a constant battlefield of her critiques. Terry, the man I married, now seemed to be more in sync with Melissa than with me. It dawned on me that this battle was not just for my marriage or my personal space, but for my identity, my dignity, and my peace. How did we get here? How had my desires, my space, and my voice become secondary to Melissa's preferences? The transformation was stark. My beloved nook became a symbol of Melissa's encroachment, the kitchen a venue for her endless criticism, and my husband, a stranger aligned with what felt like an adversary. This was only the beginning. Life, already filled with challenges, spiraled into a relentless nightmare as the oppressive atmosphere in our home mirrored the diminishing of my own space and voice. Amid this mounting tension, a discovery brought everything into sharp focus. The unmistakable sight of 2 lines on a pregnancy test, signaling the start of a new life amidst the ongoing strife. In the chaos, discovering I was pregnant should have been a joyous revelation. However, the dense, tense air around me turned almost suffocating as I held the pregnancy test, my hands trembling with a mix of excitement and dread. This milestone, which I had always imagined would be one of the happiest moments of my life, now felt like an overwhelming burden. Alone in the bathroom, tears welled up as I confronted my reflection, the reality hitting me hard. The stakes were now much higher. When I finally shared the news with Terry, his reaction was underwhelming. "Well, that's something," he muttered, quickly shifting the conversation to some renovation idea his mother had proposed. Melissa didn't just see my pregnancy as big news, she saw it as her new project. She took it upon herself to manage every aspect of it, from my diet to the birthing plan, all under the guise of being helpful. Her interference soon became oppressive. She critiqued every bite I ate, casting judgmental glances at even the simplest meals and questioning my weight management, despite my assurances that everything was doctor approved. Doctors these days have no clue, she would scoff dismissively, convinced her old-school methods were superior to modern medical advice. As my pregnancy advanced, Melissa's control over my life grew even more intrusive. She expected me to maintain our home to her strict standards, regardless of my physical state. "Karen, why isn't the living room clean yet?" she would demand, comfortably ensconced in my reading nook, which she had taken over as her base for endless phone scrolling and TV watching. My pleas for rest were ignored, with Melissa dismissing pregnancy as no excuse for laziness. Terry's silence during these interactions only deepened the tension. His lack of support became painfully clear, especially during a dinner that escalated into a heated argument over baby names. Melissa sharply criticized my chosen name, and that was the final straw. "Enough, Melissa. This is my child, and I will decide how to name them," I asserted, my patience finally snapping. Her response was one of sheer indignation, as if my desire to control my own life was a direct affront to her. Terry's feeble attempts at mediation, often siding with his mother and dismissing me as overly emotional, only widened the rift between us. This growing divide underscored a stark reality. I was not only battling for my voice and space in my own home, but now, more critically, for the right to shape my future and that of my child. In all the chaos, the revelation that I was pregnant deepened the already suffocating atmosphere of our home. Holding the pregnancy test, my hands trembled with a mix of anticipation and dread. I had always imagined that discovering I was pregnant would be one of the most joyful moments in my life, filled with excitement and celebration. However, as I stood alone in the bathroom, facing my reflection with tears welling up, this milestone felt like a daunting burden instead. When I shared the news with Terry, his reaction was disappointingly subdued. "Well, that's something," he muttered, quickly changing the subject to a renovation idea his mother had proposed. It was clear that Melissa viewed my pregnancy not just as news, but as her new project. She took it upon herself to oversee everything from my diet to the birthing plan, all under the pretense of being helpful. Melissa's interference soon evolved into outright control. She monitored every bite I ate, casting judgmental glances at even the simplest meals and questioning my weight management. Despite my assurances that my diet was doctor-approved, she scoffed. Doctors these days have no clue, utterly convinced that her dated knowledge was superior to contemporary medical advice. As my pregnancy progressed, Melissa's demands grew increasingly unreasonable. She expected me to maintain the house to her exacting standards no matter my condition. "Karen, why isn't the living room clean yet?" she would demand from her new command post in my once peaceful reading nook, which she had commandeered for endless phone scrolling and TV watching. My pleas for rest were ignored. Melissa dismissed pregnancy as no excuse for laziness. Terry's silence during these interactions only intensified the tension. His lack of support became glaringly obvious, especially during a dinner that spiraled into an argument over baby names. Melissa's harsh critique of my chosen name was the last straw. "Enough, Melissa. This is my child, and I will decide how to name them," I declared, my patience completely eroded. Her reaction was one of sheer indignation, as if my desire to make decisions about my own life was a direct insult to her. Terry's feeble attempts at mediation, often siding with his mother and dismissing me as overly emotional, only deepened the rift between us. I felt more isolated than ever, trapped in a home that had transformed into a battleground where my voice seemed increasingly insignificant. It was no longer just about selecting a baby name. It was about reclaiming my autonomy, my dignity, and the sense of belonging that had been steadily undermined by Melissa's domineering presence. As I stared at the reflection of my once gleaming wedding ring, I scarcely recognized the woman looking back at me. A woman who was gradually losing everything she cherished, her sanctuary, her self-respect, and, most painfully, her resolve to stand up for herself. During one of our tense confrontations, Melissa, brimming with a vindictive sense of triumph, delivered a blow that changed everything. Melissa insinuated that perhaps I didn't belong in their family if I couldn't handle a simple disagreement. The most excruciating part, though, was Terry's silence. His lack of response was deafening, reinforcing the notion that this struggle had been my harsh reality for much too long. Days melded into one another as I moved through a house that felt less and less like home, clinging to the sole beacon of hope I had left, the life growing inside me. Yet even this small comfort seemed under siege in the increasingly toxic environment. The tipping point came on a cold evening during yet another fraught family dinner. Despite my efforts to craft a flawless meal, Melissa's criticisms were relentless, attacking everything from the seasoning to the execution. Each of her harsh words felt like a physical blow, slowly chipping away at my already brittle confidence. But it was her next taunt, questioning my capability as a mother based on my so-called failure to manage household chores, that cut the deepest. Terry's quiet acceptance of her words was the final push I needed. Fueled by a potent mix of pent-up resentment and sheer desperation, I found my voice. "Step it up. I've been carrying our child, managing our home, and enduring endless criticism from your mother, and you're telling me to step it up?" The shock on their faces was evident, but I was past caring. For too long, I had allowed myself to be diminished and demeaned, but in that moment, I reclaimed my voice. "I'm done. I can't do this anymore." The clarity of my decision sliced through years of suppressed feelings like a beacon of light. It was a declaration of my refusal to endure any more disrespect or emotional torment. I was ready to fight for myself, for my child, and for a future free from the shadows that had darkened my life. My voice quivered with emotion as I spoke, yet I remained resolute. I refuse to raise my child in an environment where their mother is constantly undermined. If this is your idea of family, count me out, I declared, my words ringing with finality as I rose from the dinner table, leaving their stunned silence behind. Gathering only the essentials, I made my way to the door, my hands trembling as I reached for the handle, eager to escape the oppressive atmosphere. Melissa, ever the provocateur, seized the moment to deliver her most cutting remark yet. "And where do you think you're going? This is Terry's house, not yours." Pausing, I turned to face her, my resolve steeling. "Melissa, this house is mine. I bought it. I decide who stays and who goes." Terry's voice broke through, laced with desperation. "Karen, please, let's talk about this." But I was beyond negotiation. "There's nothing left to discuss," I replied, my tears bearing witness to the agony of my decision. Stepping out into the cold night felt like the beginning of a new chapter in my life, one filled with uncertainty but also tinged with a profound sense of liberation. The closing door behind me marked the end of a tumultuous saga, a final farewell to a life I could no longer endure. With each step, a mix of pain and determination coursed through me, fueled by the urgent need to reclaim my autonomy. The journey to my parents' home blurred with cold exhaustion and heartache. Just moments from the sanctuary of my childhood haven, a stumble sent me crashing to the ground. The physical pain was a mere echo of my inner turmoil, yet far from deterring me, this fall only strengthened my resolve. Arriving at my parents' doorstep, the concern etched on their faces mirrored the gravity of my situation. As they rushed me to the hospital, I realized that this moment of vulnerability marked not just an end, but also a new beginning. Lying in the hospital bed, coming to terms with my reality, I knew that returning to my former life was no longer an option. This breaking point was a crucial step towards reclaiming the life and dignity that had been stripped away from me, a painful yet necessary transition towards healing and independence. The clarity that comes with such pivotal moments was profound, illuminating the path forward from the shadows of my troubled past to a future I would shape myself. Amidst a whirlwind of emotions, I stood surrounded by the comforting yet anxious presence of my parents. Their silent worry spoke volumes about their fears concerning the true state of my marriage, now starkly revealed in its troubled depths. Breaking the heavy silence, my mother voiced her concern, her words laden with the weight of the unfolding reality. "Karen, dear, what's your plan now?" Unsure yet resolute, I replied, "I'm not sure, Mom, but one thing's for sure. I can't go back to that life. Not now, not ever." My declaration, more assured than I expected, resonated with newfound determination. My father, who had been pacing anxiously, paused to offer reassurance, emphasizing their unwavering support regardless of my decision. He urged me to consider not just my future, but also the child growing inside me. His words prompted a silent acknowledgement from me. My mind had been a battleground of uncertain scenarios, each fraught with the possibility of a fresh start. The unexpected buzz of my phone shattered my reverie, a message from Terry, a plea for communication. Yet to me, his timing felt like a door long closed. His words, unseen, were left hanging in the void as I powered off my phone, a symbolic end to our dialogue. My next steps became clear, marked by action rather than words. Consulting a family lawyer was my first decisive act toward untangling the turmoil of my marriage. With the unwavering support of my parents, we navigated the cold legal breakdown of our union, discussing divorce, custody arrangements, and financial support. Despite the sterile nature of these discussions, They empowered me, marking the initial steps towards seizing control of my destiny and securing the well-being of my unborn child. Within a week, Terry and Melissa received the formal notices, divorce papers for Terry, and an eviction notice for Melissa from the home that was legally mine. Alongside these were demands for substantial child support and compensation for the emotional turmoil I had endured. Though drastic, these actions were imperative, severing the ties that had long bound me to a life of despair. When I eventually re-engaged with my phone, it was inundated with Terry's attempts to reconnect. His messages carried a blend of regret and a plea for reconciliation. Yet the wounds inflicted by nights of humiliation, years of neglect, and Melissa's calculated malice, all silently condoned by Terry, ran too deep. The fleeting temptation to entertain his overtures was swiftly overshadowed by the memory of enduring pain. This moment wasn't merely about closing a chapter, it was about reclaiming my narrative, where the shadows of the past no longer dictated the brightness of my future. The love I once harbored for Terry had been utterly overshadowed by the grief of our disintegrating marriage. Taking decisive steps, I cleared away all remnants of him from my life. I deleted his messages, erased his contact details, and blocked him on all social media. To me, Terry had become a chapter of my past, a distressing period I was more than ready to close. I knew the path ahead would be fraught with challenges. Navigating a divorce with a child on the way was no simple journey, but I was determined to forge my path, stepping away from the stifling shadows that had once engulfed me toward a future brimming with hope. On the day of the court proceedings, the room was permeated with a sterile chill, characteristic of spaces where fates are decided. Seated beside me, my lawyer radiated confidence, while my parents provided silent yet steadfast support from behind. Across the aisle, Terry appeared lost, slowly coming to terms with the reality before him, while Melissa's expression fluctuated between shock and defiance. As the session commenced and the judge entered, prompting everyone to rise, a whirlwind of legal motions and arguments unfolded. It seemed as though Melissa and Terry were truly seeing the repercussions of their actions for the first time, not just through the legal ramifications, but through my eyes as well. When Melissa was called to testify, her usual bravado faded. She tried to justify her intrusions as concern for her son's well-being, but her arguments fell flat under the judge's skeptical scrutiny. The judge delivered a clear and firm verdict. I was granted a full divorce and sole custody of our unborn child. Terry was mandated to provide child support, and Melissa was hit with a substantial fine for emotional abuse and harassment, leaving her visibly shaken. As the judge's gavel fell, I felt a wave of liberation mixed with a tinge of melancholy. My marriage had not ended with loud confrontations, but rather with the quiet shuffling of papers and the firm, unwavering voice of justice. This chapter of my life was now firmly closed, paving the way for a fresh start, free from the burdens of the past. The cost of my newfound freedom was something I could never have anticipated on the day I exchanged vows. Exiting the courtroom, Terry approached with a look of bewilderment, voicing his remorse and disbelief at how our lives had unraveled. Yet as I looked into his eyes, I no longer saw my future but a profound void where love had once lived. I never envisioned this as our ending, Terry, but apologies can't undo what's been done, I stated firmly, turning away to leave the past behind. Melissa sought my gaze, perhaps in search of forgiveness or acknowledgement. However, I could not afford that closure. She had taken too much from me. Refusing to grant Melissa the satisfaction of seeing any further impact on my spirit, I stepped into the embrace of the outside world, which seemed to welcome me with open arms. The sun shone brighter, the colors appeared more vibrant. It felt as if I was seeing through a new lens, one not clouded by the shadows of past turmoil. My mother's embrace and her words of pride brought tears to my eyes. "You're truly free now, Karen," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "I couldn't have faced this without you and Dad," I responded, my heart swelling with gratitude for their steadfast support. That evening, in the tranquility of what was now solely my home, I discovered a profound peace. Alone, yet far from lonely, for the first time in what felt like forever, I was free to live on my terms. The path ahead as a single mother seemed daunting, yet as I felt my unborn child's gentle movements, a wave of confidence washed over me. We would navigate this journey together. I was certain of it. The trials I had endured had brought me to this juncture of self-discovery. Although they left scars, these scars told a story of resilience, not surrender. Gazing toward the horizon, I felt propelled not merely by circumstances but by choice. This realization imbued me with a profound sense of empowerment. Poised to embrace the future, I was motivated not out of obligation but from a place of deliberate determination. I recognized this moment as the dawn of a significant new chapter in my life, ready to take on whatever lay ahead with a renewed spirit and an unwavering resolve. When I married the man I believed to be the love of my life, I never imagined how drastically things would change. The turning point came with the death of his father, which revealed sides of him I hadn't seen before. Suddenly, he was a different man, unfaithful and bitterly contesting the conditions of his father's will. His behavior spiraled uncontrollably, leaving me to question if his actions were driven by grief or a deep-seated defiance. This shift in his demeanor made me doubt my decision. Had I inadvertently tied my life to someone who could potentially be unstable? To give some context, our story began at a charity event organized by my workplace. We initiated a casual conversation and exchanged numbers, but it wasn't until a few months later that we started connecting on a deeper level. He was charismatic and seemed genuinely interested in my perspectives, which was notable considering his strict religious upbringing, a stark contrast to my secular views. Although I was concerned about our religious differences, he reassured me, occasionally making light of his family's objections to him dating someone non-religious. In retrospect, I often wonder if his interest in me was influenced by his desire to challenge his family's expectations. After a year together, he felt it was time for me to meet his family. I was anxious about their reception of me, especially given his descriptions of his father as a domineering figure who missed no opportunity to enforce strict rules, impacting his childhood significantly. I anticipated the meeting with a sense of dread. The dinner was a small gathering with just his immediate family, his parents, brother, sister-in-law, and their young child. Upon arrival, I first met his brother, who was outside on the phone. He seemed amiable. Soon after, I was introduced to Kevin's sister-in-law and her 4-year-old niece, both of whom were delightful. The sister-in-law, who also worked in event planning, and I found much to discuss. As we conversed, Kevin's parents entered the room. My nerves were at their peak, knowing the significance of this introduction in the backdrop of the tightly knit and conservative fabric of his family. The evening was poised at a delicate balance, with my anxieties about their acceptance and the underlying tensions Kevin had hinted at about his father. When Kevin introduced me to his parents, I was taken aback to realize that his father was a prominent figure I recognized from the charity circuit. He helmed a major organization known both locally and internationally, a fact Kevin had never mentioned. While his mother seemed a bit reserved, she wasn't unkind. I later learned that she tended to be cautious around the women Kevin dated due to his past preference for what he described as the wild type. Contrary to my expectations, Kevin's father was genuinely warm and welcoming. He didn't mind my lack of religious affiliation, emphasizing instead the importance he placed on kindness and moral principles over my religious background. During our chat, he mentioned that Kevin's sister-in-law had managed the foundation but stepped back to focus on motherhood. He expressed a belief in the importance of not pulling people away from their families, especially when their children were young, which explained why he had outsourced the last event to my company. Initially, I had thought of Kevin's family as strictly religious, but they turned out to be quite approachable, with a mild religious inclination. Kevin downplayed his father's acceptance, suggesting he might have seen my presence as a fleeting phase similar to his college days, when he dated several girls his parents deemed unconventional. He portrayed these relationships as acts of youthful rebellion. Despite some red flags, I believed Kevin's explanations, perhaps too naively because I was deeply in love. We continued to date for another year before he proposed. We decided to live together before marriage, and during this period, I had an enlightening conversation with Kevin's brother at a family gathering. He shared concerns about Kevin's behavior, recalling his tendency to rebel against their parents during their teenage years, often resulting in conflicts, particularly due to their father's stringent rules. Interestingly, Kevin's father supported our engagement, even offering his backyard for our wedding, a suggestion that Kevin initially resisted. This complex backdrop of family dynamics, past behaviors, and evolving relationships painted a rich tapestry that continued to unfold as we planned our future together. After 3 years of living together and saving up, Kevin and I finally set a wedding date. I managed to convince him to accept his father's generous offer to host the wedding in his family's backyard. Everything seemed to be going well until 3 months ago when tragedy struck. Kevin's father passed away unexpectedly from an aneurysm. This event seemed to trigger a drastic change in Kevin. He began coming home late and was often intoxicated. At first, I attributed his behavior to grief, but soon it raised serious concerns. When I spoke to Kevin's brother, he confided that Kevin didn't appear sad about their father's death. Rather, he seemed almost relieved. Kevin's erratic behavior and the looming uncertainty over the family business prompted me to confront him directly. One night, I waited up for him until he returned around 2 a.m., reeking of alcohol and stumbling around the house. I knew it was futile to reason with him while he was in such a state, but I insisted we needed to talk, especially about the dangers of drunk driving. He brushed off my concerns and ended the conversation abruptly. Realizing it was pointless to discuss anything further at that moment, I went to bed. The next morning, I found him vomiting in the bathroom. Once he had sobered up a bit, I offered him aspirin and some dry crackers and again brought up his reckless behavior. He retorted that with his father gone, he felt free to live as he wished, without any control. I tried to explain the risks involved with his late-night escapades and mentioned his brother's concerns, which only made him angrier. He lashed out, accusing his brother and father of being preoccupied with maintaining appearances and indifferent to his true happiness. He expressed frustration over their attempts to fit him into a lifestyle he despised and judged him for deviating from their expectations. At that moment, I realized that Kevin's perceptions of his family might be skewed. Although he seemed to carry some residual trauma from his controlled upbringing, it appeared he was also trying to provoke his family as a form of retaliation. However, his actions seemed only to bring him more misery, as his family did not react in the way he hoped. Despite my lack of religious beliefs, Kevin's family had always been welcoming and accepting, never forcing their lifestyle or beliefs on me. It was clear that Kevin's struggle with his identity and his family's expectations were deeply intertwined, complicating his path to personal freedom and happiness. Kevin's father even invited me to church once, assuring me there was no pressure to attend. This gesture made me think that perhaps I had only ever seen the best side of him. I couldn't be sure what he had been like during Kevin's childhood. Regardless, it was clear that Kevin needed to mature and find his way in life. Confronting these issues head-on, I asked him directly if his dissatisfaction extended to our marriage. When he admitted he was unhappy, I was left speechless and felt the need to leave. I am currently writing this from my mother's house where I've been staying for the past week. Kevin hasn't reached out, and his brother mentioned that they aren't speaking either. I'm at a loss about what steps to take next. Given the situation, I'm contemplating whether a divorce might be necessary, but I'm hesitant to make such a drastic decision hastily. I wonder if Kevin's recent actions are a coping mechanism for dealing with his father's passing. I'm considering giving him some time to reflect before suggesting we try counseling. From the feedback on the original post, one comment particularly resonated with me. The commenter empathized with my situation and pointed out that while divorce shouldn't be the go-to solution for every marital issue, the consistent problematic behavior exhibited by Kevin, especially following his father's death, was concerning. They found it odd that Kevin chose this moment to act out, questioning whether his motivations might be deeper than just rebelling against his family's expectations. Another commenter suggested that Kevin might be struggling with religious trauma from his upbringing. If his father had been stricter when Kevin was younger, it could have left a significant impact. They mentioned that in some strict religious communities, there is considerable pressure to conform, which might include staying in unhappy marriages. They recommended individual therapy for Kevin to address potential childhood issues, suggesting that while couples counseling is a good start, it might not suffice to resolve deeper individual traumas. These insights have prompted me to think critically about our relationship and the importance of addressing these issues sooner rather than later to prevent further problems. I'm hopeful that counseling, possibly combined with individual therapy for Kevin, will prove beneficial as we navigate this challenging time. Kevin's father once invited me to church, gently stressing that I was under no obligation to attend. This experience led me to wonder if I had only been exposed to his best side, leaving me uncertain about what he was really like during Kevin's youth. Nevertheless, it was clear that Kevin needed to mature and overcome his past grievances to carve out his path in life. Facing our issues, I directly asked Kevin if his unhappiness spilled over into our marriage. When he admitted he wasn't happy, I was stunned and left without a word. Now, I'm writing from my mother's home, where I've been reflecting for the past week. Kevin hasn't reached out, and his brother mentioned that they aren't communicating either. I'm at a crossroads, unsure of what to do next. While the situation seems to call for considering a divorce, I am reluctant to make such a definitive move impulsively. I ponder whether Kevin's recent behavior is a way of coping with his father's death, and I'm thinking about suggesting some time apart before we try counseling. From the feedback I received on the original post, one person empathized with my situation, pointing out that although immediate divorce isn't always the answer, it could be justified by Kevin's consistently troubling behavior, especially now. They found it curious that Kevin chose this time, following his father's passing, to act out, speculating whether his motives might extend beyond simply defying family expectations. Another commenter suggested that Kevin might be dealing with religious trauma from his upbringing. If Kevin's father was a different person back then, it could have deeply affected him. They noted that in some strict religious settings, harsh disciplinary measures are common, and members are often discouraged from ending unhappy marriages. This fixation on his father's approval could signify deeper issues needing exploration. While couples therapy is a good start, individual therapy might be necessary to address Kevin's potential childhood traumas. The kindness his family shows me might not be entirely genuine, but rather a facade tailored for appearances. As I continue to stay at my mother's place, I struggle to articulate my feelings for an update. I feel utterly numb. The complexity of our situation leaves me navigating through a maze of emotions and decisions, questioning both the foundation of our marriage and the path forward. After spending 3 weeks away, I decided to briefly return home, trying to reach Kevin through calls and texts, but he didn't respond. Then, unexpectedly, his sister-in-law called asking to meet for lunch at a local coffee shop where her husband joined us. They inquired about how I was coping and about the situation with Kevin. I didn't hold back. I shared everything: his late nights, excessive drinking, and overall irresponsible behavior. I mentioned that I had been staying at my mother's to give him space and was considering suggesting couples therapy, but unfortunately he hadn't been responding to my attempts to communicate. During our conversation, my brother-in-law revealed a shocking piece of information. Kevin had been misusing the foundation's funds to pay for expensive hotel stays and escorts. When confronted, Kevin claimed he was entitled to the funds as part of his inheritance. However, his brother clarified that the details of their father's will were still being settled, making Kevin's justification baseless. To my surprise, Kevin had also told his brother that we were no longer together, using my temporary move as a supposed reason for his actions. Obviously, this was far from the truth. Kevin's brother and sister-in-law were deeply apologetic for the chaos and expressed their disbelief. They thought Kevin had changed for the better when he married me, just as I had once believed. They explained that Kevin's long-standing resentment toward their father began during their high school years, fueled by Kevin's rebellious activities with a rowdy crowd, which had deeply concerned their father, especially considering their family's tragic past involving a drunk driver. Grateful for their candor, I returned home the next day and resolved to pack most of my belongings. As I was packing, Kevin walked in, silent and somber. He handed me an envelope containing divorce papers. He admitted he knew his siblings had informed me of everything and showed no remorse. He bluntly stated that the only reason he hadn't initiated the divorce sooner was to ensure he wouldn't be excluded from his father's will. With his father gone, he declared his newfound freedom and casually mentioned that he planned to move into a larger, more luxurious home with his inheritance. He offered me the house and informed me that movers would collect his belongings the next day. I was so stunned by the coldness of his confession that I couldn't say a word. I continued packing in silence, eager to distance myself from the situation. Once I had loaded my car with my belongings, I drove back to my parents' house, leaving behind the life I thought I had built with Kevin. I showed my parents the divorce papers and then retreated to my room, where I broke down in tears. I was struggling to understand how my life had taken such a cruel turn, especially given my unwavering commitment to our marriage. Kevin had discarded our relationship as if it meant nothing to him. Tomorrow, I have an appointment scheduled with a divorce attorney. I'm not planning to contest the divorce. If he wants to leave, that's fine by me. Here's the second update for everyone. Things have taken quite an interesting turn. I met with my lawyer, who explained the terms of the settlement to me clearly. I would keep the house, and we would each retain our assets, including wedding gifts and rings. Since we didn't have a joint bank account, there were no financial entanglements to worry about. Honestly, I might end up selling the house. It holds no happy memories for me anymore. Since then, I've been staying at my parents' place, trying to move past this whole ordeal. They seem glad to have me around, or perhaps they are just trying to cheer me up. I plan to find a smaller place once I sell the house. Now, here's the intriguing part. Out of the blue, Kevin's brother called me. After some casual conversation, he asked if I was free the following Monday to join them for a meeting with their father's lawyer to finalize the estate matters. I was unsure why I should be involved, but he insisted it was important for me to be there and assured me that he would ensure Kevin wouldn't approach me and that we would be seated far apart. Reluctantly, I agreed. On Monday morning, I arrived at the lawyer's office. Kevin's brother, now my former brother-in-law, met me outside and thanked me for coming. He escorted me into the office, where Kevin, his mother, and the lawyer were already present. I approached their mother, offering my condolences and asking about her well-being since we hadn't spoken since the funeral. She expressed her sympathies for what had happened between Kevin and me, mentioning that she and her late husband had tried their best to guide him, but he had chosen his path. The lawyer then gathered us to discuss the estate. He apologized for the delays due to various complexities. The crucial part of the meeting revealed that most of the money would be donated to charity to support the foundation. The management of the foundation would pass to the oldest son, excluding Kevin. The remaining funds were allocated to his wife, his eldest son and his wife, and a school fund for his grandchild. Surprisingly, there was a provision for Kevin. He would receive money only if our marriage had lasted at least 6 years. Additionally, if we had a child, a school fund would be established for them. Notably, I was left a substantial sum without any conditions attached. His father had been concerned that Kevin might squander his share on frivolous things like escorts and alcohol. At the end of the meeting, the lawyer informed us he would schedule individual sessions to sign the paperwork and address any questions. As soon as we were dismissed, I left quickly, noticing Kevin's gaze following me from across the room, as if he wanted to talk. I left before he could approach me. As I write this the next morning, Kevin has been bombarding my phone with calls and messages. Despite his efforts, I want absolutely nothing to do with him after everything he's put me through. Update number 3. Kevin's behavior has become increasingly erratic in his attempts to find me. After failing to reach me through my phone, he started contacting his brother to inquire about my whereabouts. After the unsettling meeting with the lawyer, I hadn't seen any of Kevin's family until I received a cautionary note from his brother, warning me that Kevin was desperately trying to track me down. His words were soon validated when Kevin unexpectedly showed up at my parents' home. Thankfully, I was not there. My father misled him by saying I was out of town without a definite return date. Kevin left a message urging me to contact him, claiming we needed to talk. Despite my reluctance, his continued attempts to reach me felt overwhelming, and I decided to address it to finally put an end to his relentless pursuit. Choosing a time when I felt strong enough emotionally and ready to handle the conversation, I called Kevin one evening. He answered immediately, his voice eager and filled with a feigned joy at hearing from me. He asked about my welfare as if our marital strife was a mere hiccup. He began with an apology for his behavior during our split, recognizing the hurt he had inflicted and admitting he should have honored our commitment, even though he wasn't fully happy. I listened quietly, then clearly stated that I had moved beyond our marriage and was focusing on rebuilding my life. I pressed him for the true reason behind his call. Initially, he insisted it was just to see how I was doing and perhaps keep the lines open for future discussions. I firmly told him that wouldn't be necessary. As I pressed further, he finally admitted that he regretted the divorce, acknowledging that his decisions were influenced by bitterness towards his father and not a true desire to end our marriage. He suggested counseling, hoping to reconcile, but I reminded him that the divorce papers were already filed and legally binding. Our marriage was definitively over, as per his initial wishes. I stressed that he had been the one to push for this outcome, and I had merely respected his wishes. After reiterating my stance, I ended the conversation and decided to cut off all communication with him. I have no desire to revisit a relationship that caused me such distress. Life has been bustling with new beginnings and professional successes. I've been so involved with various projects and life changes. I recently finalized the divorce officially with my lawyer, choosing monthly payments over a lump sum for financial stability. I've also put an offer on a new house and am waiting for approval from the bank. Meanwhile, I met with Kevin's brother and sister again, this time to discuss a charity event in honor of their father, which I'm helping to organize. During this meeting, they updated me on Kevin's erratic behavior, including unfounded accusations against me regarding the division of our assets in the divorce. Moving forward without Kevin is the best path for me, allowing me to focus on my future and the new opportunities ahead. Although they were already aware that divorce records are public and accessible, when confronted about his dishonesty, he vented his frustrations, insisting that I should have returned the house to him, especially since I had received a considerable amount of money from his father. I explained that the house was available for purchase on the market if he truly wanted it back. It was also mentioned that he had moved into an apartment close to his work. Through his brother, he expressed a desire to get involved in our foundation to earn extra income. However, his brother promptly dismissed the idea, citing his previous misuse of foundation funds. This latest episode seems to wrap up the ongoing drama. I am eager to move beyond this turbulent chapter with Aiden and the upheaval he caused in my life. I am resolute in not letting him take up any more of my time. In response to updates from the situation, one top commenter praised me for avoiding the trap, noting that as painful as divorce can be, it's sometimes necessary, likening it to removing a harmful element. They remarked that Aiden was toxic and exploited our relationship to enact a revenge fantasy against his father. Thankfully, his father recognized his questionable character and compensated me for my troubles. The commenter also commended my brother-in-law for his support, recognizing that many remain silent in similar situations. They warned against allowing my ex to manipulate me into reconsidering our relationship, especially regarding having a child together, as he might persist in causing disturbances. Another commenter, however, sympathized somewhat with my ex, suggesting that perhaps I could have reconsidered giving him the house back. They understood that the divorce was final and legalities were settled, acknowledging the hurt he caused, but felt it seemed petty to deny him a place to live. They believed that the legalities could have been managed to transfer the house to his name. They also criticized my father-in-law for imposing conditions on the inheritance that seemed equally petty. If he wanted to misuse the money, that should have been his decision. Making someone stay married for 6 years just to access the funds seems quite inappropriate. Let's open this up for a discussion. I'm particularly interested in your thoughts on the last comment that caused a stir in the original post. While most people disagreed with the commenter, feeling that the ex-husband got his just desserts, this person offered a completely different view. What do you think about this perspective? Please share your thoughts in the comments below. If you're new here, welcome to the channel. Thanks for joining us today. Hello, my name is Mary, and I'm 42 years old. I've been married to my husband Charles for a decade. We initially worked together, but now we are employed at different branches of our company. Charles is known for his responsible attitude at work and is quite popular among his colleagues. He's confident and ambitious, always striving to present a strong image. In contrast, I tend to be quieter and less conspicuous, which made it all the more surprising when Charles, with his dynamic personality, took an interest in me. After 3 years of dating, he proposed to me with a lavish bouquet of roses, making me feel deeply cherished, and I accepted without hesitation, eagerly anticipating our life together. However, Charles soon revealed a twist in our plans. He wanted us to live with his parents. I was hesitant about this arrangement, but he convinced me, assuring me that his parents were welcoming and excited about our joint living situation. Reluctantly, I agreed. For the past 8 years, I've resided with my in-laws in what was once solely my husband's home, an arrangement I hadn't anticipated when I imagined married life. My days begin early, often with my mother-in-law critiquing minor things, such as how I clean the front door. Despite my efforts to prepare breakfast for the whole family, her incessant complaints persist as she departs for work, leaving me to hurriedly rectify any issues, feeling reduced to mere house help. This routine involves waking up at 6 a.m. to manage household chores and cooking, despite my mother-in-law being at home all day and not contributing. After a long day at my job, I return home to prepare dinner, and by bedtime, I'm so exhausted that I fall asleep immediately. This relentless cycle leaves me constantly worn out and stressed. While my mother-in-law relaxes in the living room, enjoying the breakfast I made, she reminds me to maintain cleanliness so that the neighbors will hold a good opinion of us. Despite the ongoing challenges and the lack of support from my husband in these domestic conflicts, this repetitive cycle seems unending. My father-in-law tends to ignore the ongoing mistreatment I face, burying himself in his newspaper, seemingly oblivious to the tension. Ever since I moved in with my husband's family, the relentless stress has taken a severe toll on me. I've lost significant weight, and even my menstrual cycle has ceased, making it impossible for us to conceive. Despite my mother-in-law being a substantial source of this stress, I'm the one who gets blamed for our inability to have children. There was a time when I took pride in my appearance and personal care, but now I hardly recognize the woman looking back at me in the mirror. The constant criticism from my mother-in-law and my dramatically changed appearance has plunged me into a deep depression. I've grown so accustomed to yielding to her demands that I've become completely submissive, feeling numb and lacking the energy to even think about leaving. The situation grew even more painful when I received devastating news. My father had passed away unexpectedly in an accident. It had been ages since I last visited my family home, mainly because my husband and mother-in-law would express their displeasure whenever I mentioned wanting to go. Filled with regret for not spending more time with him, I knew I needed to attend his funeral. When I told my husband and mother-in-law that I needed to go to my father's funeral, they coldly responded before I could even finish, saying, "We're not going. Let your family handle it." Their heartless reaction left me trembling with anger and grief. All I could muster in response was a quiet, "Understood." Many people attended my father's funeral. He was self-employed and had many connections, and the air was filled with tears, showing just how beloved he was. My mother, whom I hadn't seen in a long while, was shocked by my frail appearance. "Mary, what happened? You look so thin," she exclaimed with worry. "Are you sick?" Seeing how worn out I looked, she burst into tears, terrified at the thought of losing another loved one. "No, Mom, I'm not sick," I reassured her, trying to calm her fears. I tried to offer comfort, taking a moment to myself in the waiting room. Her concern made me reflect on my recent years and how my interactions with my husband and mother-in-law lacked any semblance of comfort or support, even during such a critical time as my father's death. This fueled my anger further, and I decided to confide in my mother about my challenges at home. Living with my in-laws has been more challenging than I ever anticipated, particularly because of the constant bullying I endure from my mother-in-law. It's wearing me down. During a candid conversation, I shared these feelings with my mother, who looked at me with deep concern. "I'm glad you're not physically ill, but this doesn't make me feel any better. Is this why you haven't been visiting?" she asked. I nodded, confirming her suspicion, which only seemed to deepen her worry. She handed me a piece of paper, urging, "Take a look at this, then think carefully about your next steps." It was my father's will. He had always been thorough and cautious, having prepared it just in case. As I read through the document, I stumbled upon a line that made my heart skip a beat. It mentioned an inheritance of $5 million. The shock of such a large sum momentarily lifted my spirits, sparking a flicker of hope. With this money, I could build my own house and leave my in-laws' place, I thought to myself, the idea filling me with a sudden rush of excitement and relief. Back at the in-laws' house, I continued with my usual household chores, but now, with plans brewing in my mind, I found the house got messier on days when I was preoccupied with my dreams of independence. No one else seemed inclined to pick up the slack. As I went about my tasks, thoughts of the inherited $5 million were a constant distraction. Despite the tense atmosphere at home, my desire to stay with my husband, Charles, remained strong. So, one evening, after his parents had retired for the night, and it was just the two of us, I decided it was time for an open conversation. "There's something I need to talk about," I began, breaking the silence. Charles looked at me, an expectant expression on his face. "It's about my father. I've come into an inheritance," I disclosed. "Oh, how much?" Charles asked, a note of curiosity in his voice. "It's $5 million, I revealed. Charles's eyes widened, a mixture of surprise and excitement evident on his face. "He left you that much? That's incredibly generous," he commented, then paused, his tone shifting as he added, "We should discuss how we might use this money." I felt a surge of relief that Charles seemed receptive, and I was ready to broach the main issue at hand. This was the moment I had been waiting for, to discuss our future and the possibility of moving out from under the oppressive shadow of my in-laws. But before I could voice my ideas about using the inheritance to build our own home, Charles interjected with a shocking suggestion. "We need to transfer that money to my mom's bank account right away," he declared. I was stunned, thinking he must be joking. "Why would we do that? The inheritance is mine, so it wouldn't be right to give it to your mom," I responded with a laugh, hoping he was just teasing. Charles's reaction was immediate and fierce as he slammed his hand on the table. "What are you talking about? A wife's money belongs to her mother-in-law," he exclaimed. His words were so outlandish that I struggled to believe he was serious. His stern expression sent a chill through me. "I'm sorry, but I don't understand," I replied, bewildered. "All I wanted was to suggest that we build a house for ourselves." But Charles wouldn't let me speak further. He kept insisting that my inheritance should be claimed for his mother. That night, I was too shocked to sleep. The next morning, while I was making breakfast, Charles and my mother-in-law confronted me with angry expressions. "Mary, I heard about it. You inherited $5 million and you said you won't give it to me? Who do you think you are?" my mother-in-law demanded, her voice filled with indignation. Already aware of the inheritance through Charles, my mother-in-law was adamant. "Stop arguing and transfer it to my parents' account now. A daughter-in-law's money is our money," she asserted. Their intent to seize the inheritance at any cost was unmistakable, and no matter how much I objected, they continued to pressure me. Eventually, I fell silent. That's when Charles produced a piece of paper. "You're getting carried away because you've come into some money. I'm the one who's been supporting you. If you don't change your attitude, it's divorce," he threatened. The paper he held was a divorce form, already signed by him. "Take this and go back to your parents' house. If you apologize properly, I might reconsider," he stated, his tone resolute. As I took the divorce form from Charles, a rush of memories overwhelmed me. I realized that throughout our marriage, I had never really received any financial support from him or his family. I had been contributing equally to our living expenses, and yet all the household chores fell squarely on my shoulders. Despite my tireless efforts, they had consistently treated me poorly. Now they were even trying to claim my father's money. The pressure to relinquish my father's inheritance if I stayed was immense, but being told to leave suddenly seemed like a chance for a new beginning. Holding the divorce papers, I realized I had the power to shape my future. I vowed never to surrender my father's legacy and made up my mind. After a long day at work, I returned to my parents' house. "I'm home," I called out. "Welcome back," my mother greeted me with a warm smile. Despite my exhaustion, a home-cooked meal awaited me on the table. It had been ages since I had enjoyed a meal prepared by someone else. With each bite of the delicious food, tears of gratitude welled up in my eyes. "Did you tell your husband about the inheritance?" my mother inquired. "Yes, and it caused quite a stir," I replied, recounting the demands my husband and mother-in-law had made. My mother listened, speechless at the shocking revelation. "The inheritance belongs to you, and you alone should decide your future," she comforted me gently as I cried. After being cared for at my parents' home for a week, I decided it was time to return to my in-laws' house, armed with a renewed sense of strength. "Well, I'm heading back now. Take care," I said confidently, no longer afraid to face the challenges there. As soon as I returned, my husband and mother-in-law confronted me with stern expressions and crossed arms. "Have you reflected on your behavior?" they demanded. "Yes, I apologize. Please allow me to stay in this house again," I offered, my apology more strategic than sincere. My mother-in-law's face lit up with anticipation. "Well then, hand over the inheritance quickly," she demanded. "The inheritance process is taking longer than expected. I haven't received it yet. It's a complex procedure, so it might take another 7 months or so," I explained, buying myself some time. 7 months? That long? My mother-in-law's disappointment was evident. "Well, fine," she reluctantly accepted. Both my mother-in-law and husband appeared satisfied, thinking their plan was still on track, unaware of my resolve to chart my course. Despite their demands, I didn't hand over the inheritance. However, they continued to nag me about spending a week at my parents' house. "You're neglecting your duties as a wife. The house is a mess. Clean it up quickly," they insisted. The state of disarray and unhygienic conditions at my in-laws' house after just a week was almost impressive. Previously, such chaos would have deeply upset me, but now it didn't bother me in the slightest. I simply carried out my mother-in-law's commands without letting it affect me emotionally. "It's my birthday, so I'll be leaving. Make sure to keep the house clean," my mother-in-law announced as she always went on a trip to celebrate. Naturally, I wasn't invited. "By the way, have you received the inheritance yet? It's supposed to come in today," my husband inquired, almost too conveniently hinting that the $5 million could be a splendid birthday present for his mom. "Don't forget to transfer it to Mom's account before we get back," my mother-in-law added. The timing of her birthday coinciding with the supposed arrival of the inheritance felt too perfect. As they left, I maintained a pleasant facade, bidding them a cheerful, "Take care." Once they were out of sight, I sprang into action, ready to execute the plan I had been formulating for so long. They were in for a surprise upon their return, but by then, I wouldn't have to concern myself with their reactions. Quickly, I packed my belongings and left my husband's family home behind for good. "Wow, this is incredible!" I exclaimed as I moved my things into my new home. Thanks to my father's inheritance, I had been able to build this house. I felt an overwhelming sense of happiness and relief, finally living in a beautiful place that I could call my own, free from the oppressive atmosphere of my in-laws' house. I decided to share my new home with my mother, who lives in my hometown. The sense of relief knowing I no longer had to deal with my in-laws was profound. Settling into the plush sofa in my new living room, I felt a contentment I hadn't experienced in years. To celebrate this new chapter, my mother and I decided to indulge in a day of luxury. We even hired a chef to cook for us, making the day truly special. The next evening, my phone rang. It was my husband, and his voice was thick with frustration. "What the hell is going on?" he demanded, clearly baffled by the empty house he had returned to. "I won't be coming back there. Goodbye," I stated firmly, hoping to end the conversation without further ado. But then my mother-in-law's angry voice burst through the phone. "What are you doing? Where are you now?" she demanded. "You asked me to clean the house, so I packed up my belongings," I replied calmly, maintaining my composure despite her agitation. "That's not a funny joke. Plus, you didn't transfer the inheritance. How many times do I have to tell you that a daughter-in-law's money is mine?" she shouted. "Huh, I'm single, you know," I retorted, my patience wearing thin. Suddenly, my yelling mother-in-law fell silent. "Single?" she echoed, confused. "Well, I'm a divorcee. I was handed a divorce paper, so I submitted it. I'm a stranger to you now?" "Goodbye," I said and ended the call abruptly. I couldn't help but chuckle, imagining the stunned expression on my mother-in-law's face. The freedom from that oppressive family brought a huge sense of relief. In the days that followed, I received numerous calls from my ex-husband. Whenever I had some free time, I deliberately answered the phone and calmly ignored the insults hurled by my ex-husband and ex-mother-in-law. I made sure to record all these calls. With the recordings in hand, I decided to seek advice from the police. Harassment from an ex-husband is unfortunately common, and I was determined to take every precaution to ensure my safety and peace of mind in my new life. Addressing harassment early is crucial to prevent it from escalating. Thankfully, when I approached the police with my concerns, they acted promptly and visited my ex-husband's family. For my ex-in-laws, who were deeply concerned with maintaining a pristine public image, just the sight of police at their doorstep was a significant blow. Additionally, a colleague of my ex-husband who lived nearby saw the police visit. Given my ex-husband's high-profile status in the company, word of this incident spread quickly. Colleagues who harbored resentment towards him didn't miss the opportunity to fuel the rumor mill, and soon enough, negative gossip began circulating about him. Eventually, the rumors reached my department. "Did you hear about the police visit?" my colleagues whispered among themselves. "I'm divorced now, so I'm not really in the loop," I responded, loudly enough for others to hear. The gossip-loving employees eagerly spread the news further. It didn't take long for the rumor to make its way to my ex-husband's boss. "You've been the subject of a lot of negative rumors, haven't you?" his boss remarked during a tense meeting. My ex-husband, caught off guard, could only protest, "What are you talking about?" "I can't tolerate men who don't appreciate their wives," his boss continued. "Furthermore, with these damaging rumors circulating, it could tarnish our company's reputation. Therefore, I've decided to transfer you." The transfer order issued to my ex-husband was severe, a relocation to a branch office in the least productive region, likened by some to a deserted island. "Do you understand what this means?" his boss added. Everything my ex-husband had worked for up to that point crumbled. There was no hope of advancement in the foreseeable future. With no option to decline, he had to relocate to this remote area. As for my ex-mother-in-law, she was likely taken aback by her son's suddenly tarnished reputation and the dramatic changes that followed. Following the upheaval, my ex-mother-in-law struggled to cope with the new reality that she could no longer live with her son. This isolation led her to become withdrawn, and over time she developed symptoms of depression. Concerns about her mental health grew as she began exhibiting behaviors typical of dementia, often causing disturbances at home. My ex-father-in-law found himself in a challenging position, now the primary caregiver for his significantly changed wife. Despite the strained relations, he often lamented, "Even without blood ties, a daughter-in-law is still a valuable member of the family." The difficulties faced by my former in-laws seemed almost like a form of karmic retribution for the way they had treated me. Meanwhile, my life took a happier turn. Now living with my mother, we've taken up gardening in our spacious backyard. This new hobby has brought me immense joy and satisfaction, something I might never have discovered had I remained in that oppressive household. Gardening has not only revitalized my spirit, but also improved my physical health, which had previously deteriorated under the stress of living with my in-laws. I am grateful every day that I made the decision to sever ties with them and have since found true happiness and peace in my new life with my mother.